After 7 years together, Ryan never talked to me about the future, until I stopped at a wedding and instinctively searched for him. He raised his eyebrows and smiled lazily. I remember saying that I'm a non-marriage person. He did not know that. When his mother was choosing candidates for an arranged marriage that day, I was present. After careful consideration, I pointed to one of the photos. The other party was extremely well matched with him in terms of education, family background, and ability. Seeing that I neither argued nor made a scene, Ryan relaxed his brows in satisfaction. He reached out to me, and I smiled as I placed my hand in his palm. So Ryan, there is no need to worry about the difficult matter of marrying me. Your bride was never going to be me in the first place. Chapter 01. On the streets of Melbourne, the sunlight always seemed to stretch on for a very long time. Over the years, what I liked most was walking with Ryan on foreign streets, where no one knew us. When we turned a corner, we were suddenly swept forward by a rushing crowd. I was pulled into the cheering crowd and forcibly separated from Ryan. Amid the passionate sounds filling the street, I saw the bride's white mermaid wedding dress, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. I touched my forehead and smiled, then followed local custom and said a few blessings in English. Immediately afterward, a small bouquet was stuffed into my arms. The blonde, blue-eyed bride smiled and said she was passing her good luck on to me. Holding the sudden bouquet, I stood in the middle of the crowd and instinctively kept searching for Ryan. It was only when I turned back that I realized he had been standing not far away the entire time, quietly watching this side. I stood in place and thought for a moment. In the end, I still carried the flowers and ran toward him. The wind blew past my ears, lifting the loose strands of hair on my forehead and blowing off a few petals and leaves. Behind me, someone cheered enthusiastically. Look at that brave girl, stepping into the wind. I ran up to Ryan and raised the flowers with a smile. Look, someone gave these to me. My luck is really good today. He reached out and flicked the petals, then smiled carelessly. So you didn't want to take that street? Went through all that effort to turn here, just for this bouquet? Before I could take back my smile, it froze at the corner of my mouth. It probably did not look very pretty. Ryan gathered the flowers for me. Helen, I remember telling you many times that I have no intention of getting married. Be sensible, and we can still last longer. I did not ask him in detail whether he truly had no intention of getting married, or whether he simply did not want to marry me. He always thought that every one of my actions was a test, a way to force him into considering the future. But in all these years, I had only ever tried once. At that time, I pretended that I was going abroad, foolishly testing how much weight I held in his heart. He leaned against the doorway and looked at me lazily. There should be a limit to throwing a tantrum. This is something between two willing people. There's no need to force me like this. Do you think that if you leave, I'll regret it? Do you think I'll chase you overseas? Helen, he pointed at his own cold, indifferent face. Look at me. Do I seem like that kind of person? He was not. So there was no remorse too late, and no losing the love of his life forever. It was always me lowering my head. It was always me compromising. He was a man at the very top of wealth and privilege. No matter how poisonous his words were, there would always be people willing to coax him and flatter him. And among them was me. When I thought that this might be the last trip I would ever take with him, I no longer had much desire to sulk. I tugged at his arm, raised my head, and smiled. That's not what I meant. I was just happy. That's all. If you don't like it, I won't talk about it anymore, okay? He sighed, and I did not know what he was thinking. Only after a long while did he look at the pitifully small bouquet in my arms. You like flowers? I'll buy you a big one later. We finally came out for a trip. Don't keep bringing up such mood-killing topics. As if nothing had happened, he reached out his hand, inviting me to sink once again, with Ryan. I actually had no self-respect to speak of. Many times, I thought that if he could go his whole life without marrying anyone, then I would follow him like this for my entire life, even without a title or status. But his life and marriage were far too valuable compared to mine, and he was never allowed to exile himself freely. I smiled and placed my hand in his palm, saying softly, okay. When his mother asked me that day, I had answered the same way. Chapter 02. A few days earlier, the wind and snow in Beijing had been fierce, and Puan Temple had closed for a day. Yet in the temple's back courtyard, a low-profile black car was parked, receiving a noble woman. That was the first time I had seen Ryan's mother in all these years. She was dignified and composed, her hair bun immaculate, her face fair, with no trace of age. She beckoned to me. The jade bracelet moving on her wrist was warm and translucent, worth as much as an apartment. "You're here? Please sit. Have some tea to warm yourself." She smiled when she spoke. Her tone was calm and gentle, making her appear especially kind. I looked up at her, but I still easily caught the silent distance and condescension hidden deep in her eyes. "May I ask why you wanted to see me?" I tried my best to maintain a poised manner and asked politely. "On the way there." I had thought about it for a long time and vaguely guessed the answer. Actually, a moment like this should have come long ago. It was only because it had been delayed again and again that it became drawn out. With my head lowered, I saw her push the documents on the table forward. "That child Ryan has exceptionally picky taste. We found him quite a few girls, but he either complains that this one is a little short or that one is a little dark. I remember you served as his secretary for a while. Perfect timing. Help me take a look and advise me. Which one do you think he might find pleasing?" I clenched my palm tightly. They were only 2 short sentences, neither light nor heavy, yet they made my entire body stiffen. After quite a while, I pressed my lips together and walked over to sit by the table. I opened the files. Each file was dozens of pages long. Apart from the women's basic information and photos, their life trajectories from birth until now had been organized with absolute clarity, down to the smallest details. Even their yearly physical examination records and past medical histories had been separately compiled and filed. It was strict to the extreme. Those who could be noticed by his family and chosen as candidates for Ryan's arranged marriage mostly came from comparable family backgrounds. I went through them one by one, relying on my shallow understanding of Ryan as I considered them carefully. I knew that she did not truly want me to select or judge these girls. She merely wanted to use this method to tell me that even people like them were only just enough to reach the threshold of his family, let alone me. I considered them seriously, reading page after page until my eyes ached. Finally, I pointed to one of the photos and said softly, "This young lady attended the same high school as Ryan, and she also studied abroad at Cambridge. She likes horseback riding as well. If they get along, they should have many topics in common. More than that, her father held an important position. Her mother was the principal dancer of a dance troupe, and her family had countless people in high-ranking positions, both large and small." She nodded slightly, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with what I had said. She merely smiled faintly. "Miss Helen, are you dating anyone?" I lowered my eyelashes. Only after a long while did I softly answer, "Not yet. If there is someone suitable, I will consider it." Her tone was calm as she reached out and closed the documents. "If you need it, I can also introduce someone to you." I did not refuse. I only said, "Okay, thank you." Actually, I really wanted to tell her that there was no need to worry so much. After all, from beginning to end, her son had never thought of marrying me, let alone fighting against her for someone as unimportant as me. Chapter 03. The first time I met Ryan, I smashed a bottle over a customer's head. The fat, big-eared customer clutched his head and shouted that he would make me pay. He called me a filthy whore. I stubbornly trembled as I said I would call the police. He was extremely arrogant. "Call the police? Walk out and see which officer dares take your case." I had always known that no one here, no matter how high or low, was someone I could afford to offend. In a rush of impulse, I hardened my heart and did it. After it was done, even walking out of that door became difficult for me. Blood was running down his head, but he was no longer in a hurry, like a cat teasing a mouse. He toyed with me. "Where did I touch you? Go on. Say it. Just because you say I touched you means I touched you? Where's the evidence?" High-end private rooms did not have surveillance cameras. All I could do was repeat over and over, "You did touch me. You touched me." Many people laughed. The sound was piercing. Amid the boiling noise of the crowd, a hoarse, lazy voice sounded. It was very, very soft, yet it easily cut off everyone's laughter. "Hey, fatso, was the girl's ass nice to touch?" I whipped my head around and crashed into a pair of cold, indifferent eyes, layered with deep exhaustion. Ryan was very young back then. He leaned against the windowsill, the wind brushing past his fringe. Under the glow of the lights, he looked high-spirited, dazzling, and surrounded by decadence. Because of that one sentence from him, I not only did not have to pay compensation, but also received a large sum of money in damages. Before I could thank him, he turned a corner and disappeared. Like an illusion, I tugged at the manager's sleeve and secretly asked about him. But the manager disliked my lack of tact. Is he someone you can ask about? Forget it. I thought I would just treat it as having seen a god descend to earth. In any case, I would never see him again. But later, after many twists and turns, I did see him again. He still looked lazy and weary. I had not expected him to remember me. The car stopped by the roadside. The window rolled down, revealing a handsome face. He smiled, his voice faint. Where are you going? I'll drive you. The late autumn wind in Beijing was fierce and strange. I used both hands to press my scarf down tightly, politely revealing my whole face as I looked at my benefactor. After thinking about it, I tactfully said, "It's not on the way." He froze for a moment, then laughed lightly and softly, imitating my tone. "How do you know it's not on the way?" I did not know whether it was on the way that day, but I knew that a car like this would never be on the way to the world beyond the 5th Ring Road. As if to convince me, he pointed at the driver. "He's good. Anywhere in Beijing you want to go, it can be on the way." At that time, I was not yet 20, still at the most innocent age for a young girl. I could never withstand his jokes. I had already forgotten whether my face had flushed faintly because of that sentence. I only remembered that day. His car moved without obstruction, no matter what place I casually named. He nodded and said it was on the way, but our lives were never on the way. Forcibly entangled together, accompanying each other for a stretch, only to end in complete collapse. 2 years ago, through the door I did not push open, I saw Ryan. In the dim room, he was always the one seated in the highest position. So many children of power and wealth fought to flatter him. Someone asked about me. It's been several years, right? Planning to get married? Someone found it absurd. No way, right? Even we wouldn't marry someone from that kind of family background, let alone Ryan. Someone grew excited while talking and took out a cigarette, about to light it. Then he suddenly remembered that Ryan disliked the smell of smoke and awkwardly put it away again. Ryan did not speak. Pablo defended him on his behalf. Family background is one thing. Mainly, that girl. What about her? Pablo glanced at Ryan, seeing that he did not stop him. He finally spoke. Well, that girl can't hear in one ear. Someone let out an ah and sighed. Disabled. Huh? Then that is indeed a little. The word disabled drifted down lightly, yet it was so heavy that my whole body hurt. Yes, I could not hear with my left ear. Chapter 04. I could not hear with my left ear. So when Ryan saw that I did not answer, he bent down in the dim light and asked again beside my other ear. What are you thinking about? So distracted. His mother would not take the initiative to tell him about me choosing a candidate for his arranged marriage. And of course I would not say it either. His warm chest pressed tightly against me, one elbow braced beside me. Because of the force, the lines of his arm bulged smoothly and powerfully. Over the years, we had shared countless intimate moments. At the beginning, they had been violent. Ryan was the same in bed as he was out of it. Selfish, self-centered, and supreme in his own eyes. He liked others to endure all his tastes. The back seat of the car, the icy pool water, the cold, hard floor. Only afterward would he feel a little regret and think of ways to coax me. Later, after he started caring about me a little, he finally gained some humanity and began watching my expressions to see whether I was all right and whether I was comfortable. For example, now, he frowned and thought, sweat falling from his forehead drop by drop. He did not like smoking, and the people near him were not allowed to smoke either. That was why I liked the scent on him. The cold stillness of cedar wood mixed with a faint, clear scent of grass and trees. It was cool enough to keep one awake, yet also enough to make one crave it. I raised my hand and circled his neck, saying softly, I'm fine, keep going. After everything ended, Ryan carried me to take a bath, then placed me cleanly into another bedroom. After a while, the bed beside me sank down, an arm pulled me backward slightly, and two bodies fit tightly together without the slightest gap. He was like a vine, twining into my flesh and blood. If I wanted to cut him away, there would surely be blood everywhere. I kept my eyes open. Through the floor-to-ceiling window before me, I could see the entire lake outside, its surface shimmering under the moonlight. Ryan, I finally spoke and asked in a low voice, if your family wants you to marry for an alliance, what will happen to me? I knew he was not asleep yet. I guessed that perhaps he would not answer, as he had in the past. He might lightly brush past such difficult questions, but the next second, he suddenly spoke, no longer mentioning his so-called non-marriage belief. 2 years. I was puzzled for a moment. What? He paused, his fingers winding around my hair. Helen, stay by my side for another 2 years. After 2 years, you can go anywhere you want, wherever you want to stay. I can arrange the rest of your life for you. A house, a car, money. You won't have to worry about anything. All these years, while staying beside him, I had never lacked money. The first time, he transferred one of the houses under his name to me. Later, when I opened my studio, the first sum of capital came from his investment, and the connections I could not reach were ones he lowered himself to help me build. When it came to material things, Ryan had never treated me badly. I just felt a little regretful that, at the very end, his means of keeping me were still these things, because he could not offer any extra love. So no matter how hard he racked his brains, all he could do was pile up these things that were within easy reach for him to make me stay. But thinking about it carefully, it seemed that I also had nothing I could give him over the years. At the very beginning, he once asked me, as if it were a joke, I was born lacking neither money nor love. So Helen, what can you give me? I lowered my head and thought hard, unable to hide the emptiness of my pockets. The only thing I could give was a sincere heart, but that was exactly what he looked down on. Ryan, I cannot keep agreeing to you like this. 2 years after 2 years, seeing that I did not answer, he was rarely uneasy. He straightened and leaned against the headboard. Only after a long while did he reach out, gently pinch my chin, and force me to look at him. His fingers rubbed uneasily as he demanded confirmation. Speak, even though I knew that, after I went back, I would no longer remain entangled with him. Yet by instinct, I still answered him. His brows loosened slightly, and under the light, he looked at the person in his arms, unadorned, bare-faced, yet excessively beautiful. She had always been so easy to coax. A few words were always enough to make her give up her thoughts. And then 2 years, 3 years, he still could not let go. His gaze deepened as he gestured toward her empty hand. Where is the ring I gave you? The night was deep, and breathing was light. The person in his arms did not speak. Forget it, he thought. She had always been careless. He gestured around that finger. After they went back, he would simply buy another one. Chapter 05. On the day we returned to the country, Ryan drove me to the downstairs entrance of my company. The car stopped by the roadside, and I did not speak. The locust trees by the road were already quite old, their drooping branches covering the sky and blocking the sun. I remembered the ambition I had felt when I first came here and got off the train. That year, I said that I had to take root here, that among tens of thousands of lights, one of them had to belong to me. So no matter how bitter or difficult it was, I had to stay. I could give up on so-called love, but I could not end up with nothing. Ryan's mother gave me 3 months to clean up every trace of myself and leave. I thought for a moment, turned my head to look at Ryan, and said, the exhibition at the International Convention and Exhibition Center next month. My studio needs a spot. He was a little surprised, then smiled. In all these years, it's rare for you to ask me for something. I'll have someone arrange it for you. A few years ago, I had consciously separated myself from him, resigning from the company I had worked at and building my own studio. The studio focused on high-end custom clothing that blended Eastern and Western styles. It did business with upper-class circles. Over the past few years, with some help from his connections and resources, it had more or less gained a firm foothold in Beijing. Ryan's car drove away without looking back, and I turned to go upstairs. In the time that followed, I seemed to forget all past grievances and maintained the same relationship with Ryan as before. I ate with him and slept with him as usual. After work, he came to pick me up as usual, as if nothing had happened. Only, I asked him for more and more things. This time it was an exhibition spot. Next time. I shook his hand and asked whether our pieces could be sent to Paris Fashion Week to broaden our horizons. At worst, it was rare fabric that others could not get their hands on. I would complain to him in a roundabout way. And the next second, that batch of cloud brocade would be delivered right before me. I was so busy my feet barely touched the ground. Sometimes I coaxed him, and sometimes I perfunctorily dealt with him, until one night, Ryan frowned in dissatisfaction. I thought he had noticed what was on my mind, and I was just about to explain. But what he asked about was that box from that day. I was confused. What box? He said nothing, only looked at me heavily. A few days later, I found a red velvet box among a pile of clothes. When I opened it, there was a ring inside. I stayed silent for a long while, then closed the box and put it back into the drawer. It was not suitable. I had thrown away the previous ring. Naturally, I could not accept this one either. If Ryan asked about it again, I had plenty of reasons to deal with him. Only afterward. He never asked about it again. Chapter 06. 3 months was neither short nor long. The people at the studio groaned constantly under my pressure. But when they saw the business expand several times over and the performance figures rise rapidly, they became extremely excited. Roxana had tried to arrange a meeting with me for several days. That day, I finally had some free time. When she saw me, she marveled for a long while. Why did you suddenly switch into workaholic mode? You used to work hard, but not this desperately. Ryan has also been run ragged by you, but at least you've finally come around. All these years, you had such a god of wealth sitting there and didn't use him, while you suffered bitterly on your own. I smiled. Now that you put it that way, I do feel a little regretful. I regretted pretending to be noble back then, not relying on his power earlier to climb higher and higher, so that even if I left, I could leave in glory. Fortunately, it was not too late now. As we spoke, the attic window opened. Through the gap, I looked across the way. As luck would have it, I saw Ryan with a woman. If I remembered correctly, that woman was the person in the photo I had pointed to back then. Madam had arranged for them to meet. I lowered my head and calculated the timing, then smiled in understanding. Perhaps women were naturally capable of empathy, even women in such high positions. That snowy day, she had looked at me for a long while, seeing the fragmented emotions at the bottom of my eyes. I did not know what she had been thinking, but in the end, she merely sighed. So she had already done right by me as much as she could and had not pushed me too hard. But I could not push my luck, shamelessly clinging on and making her come dismiss me a second time. That night, I sat on the sofa and waited for a very long time. So long that I startled awake from a dream. Only then did Ryan return home, stepping through the deeper cold and heavier dew of the night, a faint smell of alcohol spreading from his body. In the pitch black, empty living room, he sat beside the sofa. I did not know how long he had been looking at me. We sat like that, saying nothing for a long time. In the end, he was the first to speak. I heard Celine was the arranged marriage candidate you chose for me. Helen, you really have opened my eyes. My voice was very soft. It doesn't count as me choosing her. Madam only wanted a reference. I recommended a few candidates to her. Looking at everything together, they are all relatively. Before I could finish speaking, there was a loud bang as Ryan kicked the long table away. Did a donkey kick your brain? He suppressed the hostility in his voice. She asked you to choose. So you chose? What do you take me for? Something that can be handed away casually? After a pause, he suddenly laughed. So that's how it is. No wonder you've been asking me for this and that so vigorously these past few months. What? You think you've gotten enough from me, so now you want to push me out, then pat yourself on the back and walk away? Ryan's reaction made me feel somewhat baffled. So I asked him, then can you marry me? He fell silent and did not answer. So I pressed my lips together and finally asked the question that had lingered in my heart for many years. Is it because of my ear? Do you also despise me for being disabled? What nonsense are you talking about? His voice rose slightly, his tone stern, and yet he instinctively comforted me, just as he had many times before. How does that count as a problem? Don't keep putting the word disabled on yourself. I lowered my head and smiled softly, unexpectedly feeling a little relieved. relieved that he simply did not want to get married, and that he did not despise my year, whether he was sincere or not. At least in this moment, I did not feel so embarrassed. I looked at him and slowly let go. But my mother hopes I'll get married and have a child. Whether it's a boy or a girl, I won't spend my entire life unmarried. I'll move out of here tomorrow. I looked around at my surroundings, every glance passing over a memory. I hope this relationship can end peacefully. He stood up and looked down at me. You say it ends. And it ends? Is there such a good thing in this world? If Ryan wanted to use power to suppress someone, then resistance would not be allowed. Helen, when I say 2 years, I mean 2 years. Before I'm tired of you. Do you think you can leave? The 2 years he kept emphasizing did not necessarily mean he wanted me to stay that much. What he probably cared about was that the person cutting off this relationship early was actually me. Chapter 07. Ryan left the house, and the car turned a corner, driving straight toward the riverside. When Pablo saw him arrive, he waved. Here. Ryan took a seat and sank into the sofa. Someone poured wine and toasted him. He did not refuse. He reached out and took it. It would be best if the alcohol could disperse the blockage in his chest. What's going on? Pablo asked curiously. You seemed pretty pleased with yourself lately. Who ruined your mood tonight? Which little brat has a death wish? Ryan touched the wine glass, and for some unknown reason, he let out a scoff. An ungrateful wolf that can't be tamed. Its wings have really hardened. Pablo understood. Helen? The girl's beautiful face popped into his mind. These years, Ryan had truly been quite patient with her. She could not hear in one ear. So every time they went out, he never let anyone sit on her left side. He sat on her right himself. Whenever there was something amusing, he would lower his head, lean closer, and tell it to her. With things already like that, Pablo did not think she could still make much of a fuss. So he was puzzled. What happened? I think she's quite sensible. I heard she built that studio all by herself. If there's really some career hurdle she can't get past, it's just a matter of you lending a hand. He had never imagined that the two of them could have emotional problems. Helen was extremely clingy. Every time she looked at Ryan, her eyes were so bright they practically glowed. Besides, when someone met people like them, even if she was only a lover, she could avoid detours that would take several lifetimes. An opportunity like that was something countless people could not obtain even if they begged for it. She should not be foolish enough to throw it away. Ryan tugged at the corner of his mouth and said mockingly, She's got quite a temper now. She asked me if marriage was impossible, then brought up breaking up in the next second. Tell me, what gives her the right? Pablo was no longer surprised and laughed along. She really doesn't know what's good for her. Seeing Ryan's expression darken, he changed his tone. Look at my mouth. What kind of problem is this? Which of the girls around us hasn't made a scene like this before? In the end, don't they all obediently lower their heads? Women nowadays are all the same. They think they're 1 in 10,000 and insist on having a proper title before they're willing to stay. But in reality, if one leaves, plenty more will throw themselves at you. People like them all had the same attitude toward those young girls. They were like dazzling products on display in a mall. Pretty and flashy, manufactured in the hundreds and thousands. They did not even need to exert any effort. Someone would deliver them to their door for free. Ryan had once been one of those people. But right now, as he looked at Pablo, he instinctively stood from an outsider's perspective. He did not even know where this sudden sense of morality had come from, but he actually began condemning him. Shut up. Not everyone is like you. The words left his mouth, and even he was a little surprised. Pablo continued persuading him. Relax. It won't take many days before she comes looking for you to make peace. Just like before. He remembered it very clearly. Once, Helen had somehow happened to see a girl throwing herself onto Ryan, and by coincidence, Ryan had not pushed her away either. At that time, she had probably truly been spoiled until she no longer knew her place, because she actually made a huge scene with Ryan. What kind of person was Ryan? Who around him did not go along with him? He found it boring and did not answer her calls for several days. Helen's call had then come to Pablo. Her voice had been thin, with a sobbing tone, begging him to help. Pablo had always been soft-hearted toward beautiful women, so he casually helped with that small favor. This time, it was the same. He took out his phone and promised confidently, Don't worry, my phone is on. If she can't reach you, she'll definitely call me. Ryan glanced at him and said nothing. Chapter 08. The first time Ryan brought me out in public, everyone was placing bets. They bet on how long I would stay by his side, and the prize for the winner was a Ferrari. In the past, the people by Ryan's side had never lasted more than a month at most, so they all bet that I would not last over a month. I listened with my right ear and secretly had Roxana place a bet that I could last more than 2 months. Roxana was also a poor student back then, so I gave her all my money. At that time, on the last day of the second month, I was on tenterhooks, staring at Ryan without blinking, afraid that he would tell me to get lost in the next second. But he only beckoned to me, smiled, and fed me a bite of dessert. Cherry, your favorite flavor. Try it and see if it's good. I nodded blankly. It was good. Later, it became 3 months, then 4 months. Ryan and I stayed together year after year. Time quietly shifted. Spring blossoms fell into autumn. The time we spent together went from 1 hour a day to 3 or 4 hours a day. Later, we wished we could stick together every second. Before I graduated from university, when he was not busy, his car would wait at the east gate. After class, I would fly toward him like a little bird. Then I followed him in and out of all kinds of occasions, surrounded by luxury, extravagance, blooming temptation, and countless scenes I had never seen before. When he was busy, he usually carried me into the car and took me to the company to work overtime. Ryan was different from idle rich heirs. Whether it was managing companies or turning the tide in the business world, he could be considered top tier. 1 year, I looked at a stock on his computer screen that was all red and silently memorized the code. In only a few days, my principal multiplied several times over. It could be said that from the day I met Ryan, I had never lacked money. Aside from that, he sometimes liked to act as a teacher. Most of my skills came from him: archery, horseback riding, skiing. Even if I was not excellent at some of them, I was at least proficient. Business dealings, stock trading, and finance also became fairly easy for me to handle. Sometimes, it was as if he deliberately wanted to prepare me in advance. He would intentionally or unintentionally say, "Learn more, so that if you leave me one day, you won't starve outside." At the time, I always thought it was a joke, but now that I thought about it, he had been telling me back then that we would not last. During our first time, I half resisted and half yielded, testing him as I asked why he liked me. His fingers brushed across my cheek. He seemed to find it funny and gave me a reason that could not be called sincere, but was at least practical. "I like pretty ones, and it just so happens that you're pretty enough." I did not know whether I should have felt fortunate or disappointed at the time. I only remembered that night was filled with ambiguity, and desire flooded the air. I cried in his arms again and again, until my voice was so hoarse that I could not speak. Chapter 09. The next day, I ignored Ryan's threat and still left. I said I was moving, but in truth, many of my things had already been slowly moved away from that place. So when I left, I was practically empty-handed. The maid saw me off as usual and smiled. "Miss, will you still be eating at home tonight?" "No," I said softly. "I won't be back tonight. I won't be back in the future either. You don't need to make my meals anymore." She froze in place, somewhat at a loss. I smiled and turned to walk outside. 7 years was long enough for me to become unlike myself. In the past, I was always clinging to Ryan, confirming that his affection was not only because of my appearance. I wanted him to nod and admit that there was at least a little fondness because of my character, my personality, and everything inside me. Later, when he gradually learned how to coax people, he would follow my words, praise me all over, and then say he liked exactly that. Now that I was a little older, I felt fortunate that I had been beautiful enough back then to attract his gaze. Only then did I gain the conditions to accumulate capital step by step, and only then could I completely take root here after many years. Instead of fleeing in disgrace, in the time that followed, Ryan did not come looking for me. Perhaps he never returned to the villa again, or perhaps he simply did not care about my retreat. My apartment was very close to the studio. It had 3 bedrooms and 1 living room, and I had bought it outright 2 years ago in a place where every inch of land was worth gold. Only, these years, Ryan liked having me by his side, and he looked down on this apartment of mine. So after it was renovated, it had sat there for 2 years, still looking brand new. Several weeks earlier, I had already had someone come clean the entire place, filled in the missing home decorations, and moved in most of my daily necessities. Now, when I opened the door and looked inside, the warm yellow lights, enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, and soft sofa made it look quite properly like a home. I stood before the window. The lights of the city intertwined and spread out beneath my feet like a long road, stretching into the distance like rivers flowing into the sea. I had said that I would stay in this city, so whatever difficulties I encountered next, I would have to endure them. Unexpectedly, Ryan did not make trouble for me. In the time that followed, my studio progressed smoothly. With the accumulation from the early stage, it thoroughly gained recognition both domestically and overseas, especially the pieces sent to Paris Fashion Week. That day, Ryan had been kind enough to help things along to the end, and after the runway models wore them, the name of the Eastern aesthetics that my studio specialized in resounded completely through the international runway, making it the most eye-catching emerging brand of that fashion week. During the second half of the celebration banquet, I was just about to push open the restroom door and come out when I heard Ryan's name. I heard that Helen was dumped by Ryan. It makes me so happy. Over the years, relying on Ryan, she acted like her eyes were on top of her head. Last time, there was that celebrity-style piece from her studio. I liked it, so I had someone go say hello and ask her to reserve one for me. Do you know what she said? They don't accept queue jumping. Please make an appointment and wait in line. Excuse me? Does she not know who I am? In Beijing, what luxury brand dares not give me face? The first time I ever had a door shut in my face growing up was because of Helen. Who knows where she got that confidence? Now that Ryan has withdrawn, I want to see how long her studio can survive. Enough. It's just a small studio with a bit of fame. You're the only one who thinks so highly of it. The first person muttered. The clothes really are beautiful. Though, after they walked away, I pushed open the door and came out. The restroom mirror reflected my slightly flushed face after drinking. I lowered my head to wash my hands, moving slowly, pressing down on my trembling fingers. At this moment, I had no choice but to admit that I was afraid. Ryan's delayed action was like the sword of Damocles hanging over my head. I knew it would fall sooner or later, but I did not know when. If he truly felt that I had made him lose face and wanted revenge on me, then destroying my studio would only take the movement of one finger. Chapter 10. That day did not come late. In fact, it came so suddenly that I was caught off guard. The new batch of song brocade fabric kept failing approval. The reason given from above was that the fiber content seriously differed from the labeling, but I had people take it apart and test it again and again. After several rounds of inspection, all results proved that there was nothing wrong with the fabric. I realized something and quietly pressed pause on the process. The problem was not with the fabric at all. I could not reach Ryan, so I called Pablo. When he answered, he laughed for no reason. I did not speak. He laughed lazily. Helen, why are you going to all this trouble? Fine, I'll give you an address. Come over. When I arrived, I pushed open the door and looked at Ryan first. Hearing the sound, he turned around, leaning against the table. He raised an eyebrow and looked at me. What are you here for? He smiled. When you left, weren't you quite impressive? You didn't take your clothes or your bag, as if you wanted to draw a Mariana Trench between us. I had originally thought that I understood him at least somewhat. After all those years of intimacy, I had met him when I was still ignorant and naive, and afterward, under his hands, I had been carved into the person I was now. He had seen every bit of hardship I had endured. No matter what, I had thought he would not really do anything to me. So when I left, I had been so fearless. But in truth, there was still a small thought hidden inside me. I thought he would feel pity, but I was wrong. So I bent slightly toward him. Boss, I came to ask you to show mercy. If you feel that I made you lose face, you can ask me to do whatever you want, but there are more than 100 people under me who still need to eat. I have to be responsible for them. When I finished speaking, Ryan frowned, as if he had thought of something. Pablo, he put down his wine glass with too much force, spilling wine all over the table. Pablo responded with an hey, still grinning cheekily. Don't worry about what method I used. Didn't she come to you on her own now? I glanced at him. He showed not the slightest guilt. Compared with Ryan, Pablo was always enthusiastic and smiling. But deep down, he was even colder and more selfish, carrying the habitual numb cruelty of their circle. At this moment, even if someone died right in front of him because of one of his jokes, he would only say how unlucky it was. After coming out of the private room, we passed through a cold, quiet corridor. At the end were artificial hills and flowing water. Ryan had his back to me while making a phone call. His tone rose and fell. After hanging up, he walked toward me, his voice heavy. When something like this happened, the first person you suspected was me. Helen, is that right? I could not say it was not, so I said nothing. Ryan laughed lowly. I said you were an ungrateful wolf that can't be tamed. And here you are, proving it to me one thing at a time. With both hands in his pockets, he bent down and looked into my eyes. Helen, I don't have to have you. You really don't need to avoid me like I'm some snake or scorpion. As long as I want. There are countless women prettier than you, smarter than you, healthier and more whole than you. What makes you think I would be so reluctant to let you go? He straightened. You're overthinking it. I'm not petty enough to make things difficult for that little studio of yours. There's no need. He lowered his head and dialed a number. From today onward, there is no need to report anything about Helen or that lousy studio of hers to me. Yes. It has nothing to do with me. Do you not understand? Why are you still asking? He hung up and lifted his chin toward me, his expression arrogant. As you wish. We'll part on good terms. Don't regret it. In the past, he always loved stopping me halfway. The thing he said most often was, "Where are you going? I'll drive you." At this moment, he turned around and threw down 2 words. No ride. I looked at his back and stood there for a very long time. Long enough for my legs to ache faintly. Thank you. Goodbye. I said it softly, even though he could not hear me. Chapter 11. I thought that when things completely shattered, I would feel very relaxed. But instead, I began to dream, fragments of the past appearing again and again. The year I graduated as a senior in university could be considered a threshold in my life. While I was overwhelmed with job hunting, my mother suddenly fell ill. For a time, I could not look for work at all. I put all my focus into taking her to see doctors. At that time, Ryan was abroad on a business trip. I did not tell him. I took my mother all over the hospitals. And at night, I faced the base of the hospital wall, crying while praying. I wanted Ryan to help me, but several times, the words reached my lips and would not come out. Until that day, when I bumped into someone around a hospital corner, the medicine and documents in my arms scattered all over the floor, and I looked utterly disheveled. I kept apologizing. I'm sorry. I was exhausted. Just as tears were about to fall, a hand helped me up. I saw Ryan, travel-worn and dusty. He dragged me to one side, then crouched down himself to pick up the things that had fallen. Don't be afraid, he said. I'm here. Your mom will be fine. Afterward, my mother moved into a special care ward. An expert team came whenever called, and every examination and treatment plan was the most advanced available at the time. Because of this accident, I missed the best period for recruitment, so Ryan suggested that I go to his company. A secretary position was specially created beside him, and only I was hired. It was precisely because I nodded that time that later, whenever I argued with him, he would always make me look at the dense crowd outside. Throw a stone, and it could kill half a crowd of top students. What do you think you relied on to get into this company? Others have to go through group interviews. First interviews. Second interviews. You nodded and got in. Do you really think you're that capable? My academic background was not top tier. If I had relied only on myself, I would not even have passed the resume screening for a group like that. When his words became too harsh, he would regret it again. So every time, he would teach me even more, constantly forcing me to grow too fast. What does academic background count for? Learn from me. Your future achievements may not be any worse than those who graduated from the top universities. Later, he trained me very well. Once the blade was unsheathed, every strike was sharp. The secretary position was no longer enough for me to display my abilities, so he placed me in the business team. Facts proved that I did no worse than anyone else. If we were talking about sincerity, He had had at least some. So when I said I was grateful to Ryan, that was the truth. For a long time after that, I did not see Ryan again. No one tripped me up anymore either. The studio expanded in scale and did better and better. That day, when I dragged my business trip luggage out of the airport, there was a car parked by the roadside. Ryan's face came into view. In the passenger seat was an unfamiliar young girl. She turned her face sideways. She was very young, her eyes bright as she spoke to him. Ryan gave her face and smiled. The girl spoke even more enthusiastically. The next second, his gaze turned over and met mine. I smiled at him politely and distantly. Just about to greet him, he tugged at the corner of his mouth. The next second, the car sped away. I could not describe what I felt. There was already someone new by his side so soon. But that truly was the kind of person he was supposed to be. There was nothing strange about it. Chapter 12. After Roxana learned that Ryan and I had separated, she was happy for half a day. I told you to break up 800 times, and you finally listened once. What's with that look? Fine. I'll confess honestly, your mom did ask around. She was anxious for me to introduce you to some friends. But it's not like my brain is broken. Your career is this big. You have money and looks. Where am I supposed to find someone worthy of you? She leaned over sneakily. So, sis, let me tell you, men are all no good. Listen to my advice. I pushed her head away and laughed. What? She said excitedly. If one day you really want to get married, just marry me. I'm more useful than a man. I'm willing to marry into your noble house, even as a concubine. For the last sentence, she screamed until her pitch changed. After she finished speaking, the two of us curled up on the sofa and laughed together. The days passed one by one, and I remained so busy that I never stopped. That night, I had just gotten off work when my phone rang. After I answered, Pablo's voice came through. Helen, he's drunk. Come over and take a look. Pablo. I called his name without any courtesy. I don't owe you anything. Stop always talking to me in that commanding tone. There was silence for a long while. Then his tone softened somewhat. Then I'm asking you to come over. All right? These years, he hasn't treated you badly. There's no need for you to be this heartless. Is there? I said calmly. He and I ended long ago. You should call his new girlfriend instead of disturbing me. What damn girlfriend? He's calling your name. Pablo sounded a little irritated. Just as I was about to hang up, he raised his voice. It's his birthday today. You don't know? I paused and said nothing. I truly did not know. The birthday Ryan had always celebrated with me was May 23rd. I had never known that he had another birthday on September 16th. The phone on the other end was taken by someone else. I heard Ryan's voice, low and drunk. Helen, as long as you're willing to come back, I won't hold anything from the past against you. This is the last time I'll call you. There won't be another. Think carefully. Between us, you'd better think it through. I thought for a very long time, and the phone was silent for a very long time too. Before hanging up, I told him, Ryan, I won't go over. You favor freedom and do whatever you please. So I wish you enough freedom for the rest of your life. A wandering life without regret. Chapter 13. That night was like a sudden moment of drunken confusion for him. After that, we never crossed paths again. In a city with such clear class divisions, without deliberately maintained connections, no one would ever run into anyone. During New Year, I gave all the studio employees an early holiday. While I rushed back home on the 27th day of the 12th lunar month, the familiar residential complex had gained the atmosphere of the new year. Shops along the street had begun putting out spring festival couplets. When I took out my keys to open the door, my mother heard the sound and ran over in an apron to open it for me. A crowd of people had gathered inside the house. Several aunties at the mahjong table in the side room saw me and greeted me with smiles. Wisps of smoke drifted from the kitchen. This year, the family reunion was at our house. The whole extended family had already gathered together, busy preparing for the new year. On New Year's Eve, Suzhou had a snowfall against the whitewashed walls and black-tiled roofs. The white became even clearer, and the black even quieter. The entire city turned into an ink-wash painting. My little cousin walked beside me carrying a lantern and asked, "Does snow in Beijing look like this too?" I thought about it. Beijing's snow was bleak, cold, and too solemn. lacking a little liveliness. It's still quite different. After the new year, when I go back, I'll take photos for you. Okay. The little girl's voice was crisp, and her smile was sweet. I withdrew my gaze. When we reached downstairs, my little cousin winked at me. Sis, there's a handsome guy looking for you. After saying that, she ran upstairs. I guessed that later, my mother and the others would all be leaning against the window to watch. Ryan's car was parked under the shade of a tree. He wore a black overcoat, snow resting on the ends of his hair, his face so pale it looked almost transparent. I turned and walked outside, and he stepped forward to follow me. Why did you come here during New Year? I asked him. In the past, on New Year's Eve, he had to go to many places. He often only had time for me in the latter half of the night. He stepped on the snow, each step making a soft crunch. His voice was light and casual. To give you New Year's money. I stopped and looked at him seriously. Can you stop being so ridiculous? Do I lack that little bit of money from you? After the words left my mouth, I remembered that the New Year's money he used to give me was at least over 100,000, and sometimes several 100,000. It was not really just a little bit of money. I could not figure out what he wanted to do, so I could only say vaguely, you should leave quickly. Don't stay here. He smiled and looked around. Didn't you always say before that you wanted to bring me home to take a look? Helen, show me around. Let me see the place where you grew up. I'm not lying to you. I'll leave after I look around. He looked directly at me, his gaze wrapped in a layer of mist. I stood silently for a moment, then lifted my foot and walked forward. 10 minutes from where I lived was an abandoned kindergarten. I had attended preschool there for 3 years. For primary school, we turned right along the riverside and walked another 5 minutes. Back then, I always sat on the back of my father's bicycle. When he went to work, he would drop me off at the school gate. When I went to junior high in town, I began boarding at school. Only on weekends would I take the bus home. Snow fell softly. My words had no logical order. I spoke wherever my thoughts led me. Ryan listened for a long while before finally speaking. Helen, do you have to get married? If you really want to. Was it because I had withdrawn without hesitation, and because you could not accept it, that you were now thinking of taking one step back? Or had you tossed and turned, thought it over again and again, and finally decided that marrying me was not so unacceptable after all? And at worst, you could let go again once you got tired of me? I did not know, and I did not want to explore it. I interrupted him. There is no possibility anymore. Ryan, there is no possibility between us anymore. I would not try again. I would not make the same mistake again. My life would not move backward, and I never looked back. Ryan's fearless, confident smile stiffened for an instant, and the hand hanging by his side clenched unconsciously. His throat moved. For a long while, he did not speak. Chapter 14. On the way back, neither of us said another word. He walked toward his car, and I walked toward the staircase. 2 opposite directions. I went upstairs step by step and did not look back again. When I returned home, the living room was empty. I sat quietly on the sofa. After quite a while, my little cousin carefully patted my shoulder and stood on my right side. Sis, that person from earlier gave this to me and asked me to give it to you. I turned my head. It was a check. I did not look clearly at the exact number of zeros. My little cousin flipped the piece of paper back and forth. He said, it's New Year's money for you. Is this money? Why does it look like this? I took out another red envelope and sent her off to sleep. After midnight, the sound of firecrackers and fireworks rang through the entire world. Leaning against the sofa, I suddenly remembered that New Year's Eve from years ago, my family had gathered together to stay up for the New Year and chat, but I alone had rushed out into the wind and snow, filming one firework video after another. I sent them to him and asked proudly, Beijing doesn't allow fireworks, so I collected some for you. When you wake up, take a look. Ryan only replied at 2 or 3 in the morning. His words were brief. They're pretty. For a long time afterward, he thought I loved watching fireworks. Once, when we were soaking in the hot springs at Xiaotangshan, he had people set off fireworks for an entire night. Whatever he wanted to see, he could see it, without effort. The scenery of his life from then on would be no different. There was nothing in his life worth regretting. Chapter 15. On New Year's Eve, Ryan drove away alone, heading north. Outside the car window was a deep night. Occasionally, scattered fireworks exploded in the distance, then quickly fell back into darkness. There were few cars on the highway. Only his car sped across the empty road, looking especially lonely in the cold night. The windshield wipers swept away the broken snow every now and then. The heating inside the car was very warm. The mechanical female voice in the navigation system tirelessly reminded him of the route. He remained silent the whole way, his fingertips gripping the steering wheel until they turned faintly white. The phone rang. He suddenly jolted awake for a moment, but when he saw the caller, he immediately lost interest. Pablo had guessed something and still brought out that same set of familiar words to comfort him. People in their circle had always been like this. Isn't it just one woman? What kind of woman can't you have? There are plenty out there. Bro, seriously, there's no need. She isn't that special either. It won't take long before you can't even remember what she looked like. Their group had always thought this way. Women, after all, were abundant. There were plenty who knew how to behave and please others. Missing one or two disobedient ones did not matter. Ryan felt that he had already retreated again and again. If Helen did not appreciate it, then that counted as her not knowing what was good for her. One day, when she had nowhere else to go, she would surely think of today and regret it to death. But at this moment, he suddenly felt a little lost and could not answer for a long time. He asked himself, were there really many women like Helen out there? Someone like her, passionate and brave, reckless and innocent. When she loved someone, her eyes could drown him. Ryan looked at the rearview mirror. The scenery outside the window retreated wildly. For a single instant, he had an illusion. It was as if something else, too, was grandly withdrawing from his side like a tide. What was it? He did not think further.